Hare Bol. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Should we start with some chanting? Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Nivadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudhi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Shri Prabhupada ki. Before we begin, I have this note here that says there's a white Subaru which is parked in the wrong place. Anyone here own a white Subaru? You don't have to admit it to all of us, but if you do own one, then please move your car because it's parked in the wrong place. The license plate is 7NQV825. If you remember your license plate, but you don't remember it's a white Subaru, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. So wonderful to be here with all of you. Anyone feel a little warm right now? I don't know who's in charge of the temperature control, but thanks for being here. It's Sunday in rainy Silicon Valley Bay Area. You all made it out here and avoided staying at home because of the floods. I'm really happy to be here with all of you, and it's a really interesting time of year, I think. Do you all agree? It's an interesting time of year. It was Thanksgiving not too long ago. That's kind of interesting. The end of the year is coming. People normally make New Year's resolutions. And here, for us, it's a very interesting time of year because it's the Prabhupada Book Distribution Marathon, which is also a very enlivening time of the year. And yesterday was Gita Jayanti. Yesterday was the day that the Bhagavad Gita was spoken. If you don't have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, we have some spare ones just over here on this side, and we can you can speak to my friend Navina Narada Prabhu, and he can help you obtain a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, he said a stack of them, not just a copy. But I was thinking about this a lot, and I've just noticed this with the people I work with and other people I know. This time of year, people become very self-reflective. Particularly at Thanksgiving, people start to look back, and they think about all the things that they're grateful for. Do you agree with this? Is this what people do? Do you do this? You don't celebrate Thanksgiving, do you? But this is what people do. Thanksgiving, they look back and they think about all the things that they're grateful for that have happened to them over the last year and maybe even longer. And New Year is also a very interesting time because then what people do is they start to reflect about the future, right? You ever heard of New Year's resolutions? You have? Some of you have? Ever made any? Ever keep them? Some people do, some people don't, huh? But it's interesting because then we project into the future with our New Year's resolutions, and we think about what's coming and what we'd like to do. And ultimately, those resolutions are solving some problem, right? I'm going to start working out. Why? Because I'm not happy with the way, I am right now. Or I'm going to read more. Why? Because the problem is I don't feel like I read enough or something like that. It's always trying to solve some problem. So I find that kind of interesting. And the Vedas, they explain, and Srila Prabhupada often explained, that living entities, we have some commonalities amongst us all. And that is that we have the propensity for eating. Anyone do that sometimes? I do. You can tell maybe. Eating, sleeping, do some of that. Mating and defending, we won't talk about those. But this is a commonality between all living entities, is that we all have this kind of propensity to eat, sleep, mate, and to defend. And so all living entities, they're thinking about how to do this. How to fulfill these needs or these desires. How should I eat? How should I find a place to sleep? How should I find some way to procreate? How should I produce something? How should I defend myself or create security for myself? And so we're on this thing of how to do this, how to do this, how to do that. But there's a unique feature with human beings, which is not just to ask how, but to ask a better question, which is why. This question of why. Why should I do this? Why should I be thinking about these things? And oftentimes what we think about in a lot of particularly spiritual traditions and paths is just to understand that I exist, right? I believe it was Nietzsche. He said, "I think, therefore I am." You heard that? And other people say, particularly in Eastern traditions, don't try and be something, just be. Just be. Don't try and be something, just be. But what we say is, but why be? Why should I be? Why? What is the purpose of it all? I mean, it's nice to say, well, you exist and that you should be happy with just existing. But that's not enough for most of us, I don't think. I don't think that's enough for anyone, in fact, because just to know something and not understand the why behind it becomes somewhat challenging to the consciousness, because we need reasons, we need something to motivate us and for us to have a deeper understanding. And this is a unique feature of human life, of the human being, is that we can ask this question not just how, but why? And this ultimately is the Bhagavad Gita, which we celebrated the advent of yesterday. And in fact, the Srimad Bhagavatam and so many other texts, it's all basically someone asking this question, or asking multiple questions. Not just the how of something, but the why of something. And so I wanted to explore that somewhat today. And I was reflecting on this, that the answer to this question of why really depends on the answer to the question I. Not the question I, but your why is dependent on your sense of I, right? Who you are determines why you act in the world in a certain way and why you try and do certain things in the world. And you may have this experience. How many of you have parents? We all have parents, that's a trick question. Sometimes your parents, I remember when I was younger, parents would say, make your bed. And I say, why should I make my bed? And say, because I'm your father and I said so. Or like, I'm your mother and I told you so. And that was the why was coming from their sense of I. I am your father or I am your mother and I said so and therefore you have to do it. We have a certain relationship. And so for us to answer this question of why am I? Why am I in this world? why should I do the things in this world that I'm supposedly forced to do? Well, first you have to figure out who you are, because who you are really is the foundational piece of that. And so what that indicates is that identity is really important, right? The sense of identity. And so I'll stop here and I'll ask all of you, what is your description of identity? What is identity? You don't all have to go at one time. Another Kishore Prabhu, you laughed, so please.
Actually, yes. Somebody asked it in the class. Actually, I live in Chicago. I was present, and then different answers came, and then of course the one answer which the speaker gave, I don't know whether you want me to give. So he quoted this verse, which I think Prataprudh Maharaj quotes to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Na ham vipra, na cha narpati, na hi vaishyo, na shudro. Na ham varin.
Hey man, you're giving away the end of the class. He's too exalted, I knew I shouldn't have called him. Well, why didn't someone give me a dictionary definition? What's the dictionary definition of identity? I believe, from what I remember, it's something that designates a thing or person. If someone has a definition of it, I'd be very grateful. Yeah, please.
So, the characteristics determining who or what a person or thing is.
Can you say that one more time?
The characteristics determining who or what a person or thing is.
Very nice. The characteristics determining who or what a thing is. Is that right? Or did I mess up the words there?
No, that's right. And then there's some other more not so clear meanings. The fact of being who or what a person or thing is, like as a noun in identities.
Yeah.
A close similarity or affinity. And then there are definitions of identity in mathematics also. Okay. We won't go there.
Yeah. So we can see that identity basically is a determining factor by which you tell what something is or who someone is. And we also have our own identities. And I would say that we have multiple identities at any one given time. Right? So I gave the example of parents earlier. So to my parents, my identity is that I'm their son. Right? To my son, my identity is that I'm his father. To my wife, my identity is that I'm her husband. To the people that I work with, who I supervise, my identity is that I'm their senior in the company. But to the founder of my company, my identity is being his junior. So at any given time, we're holding multiple identities. And so when we talk about the why of life, we have to also talk about which identity you put in the primary position, which identity goes into the driver's seat. And so I've been thinking about this a lot over the last few years, about this idea of primary identity and secondary identities. And I'll start with secondary identities, and then we'll discuss a little further about primary identities. On the realm of secondary identities, these are identities that will change over time, right? So at one point, if you believe it or not, I was a teenager. And that was my identity. I had long hair. I thought I was going to be like Mr. Cool or something. Now I don't have any hair, and I'm no longer a teenager, so that identity has now changed. If your other identity is that, I am a, software engineer. Any software engineers in the house? It's just a few of you. That's my identity. I'm a software engineer. Okay, but what happens when you retire? You're no longer a software engineer, so what happens to your identity? Or what happens if, God forbid, you get fired? Or you get laid off, or whatever they say these days. The identity no longer exists anymore, so then who are you? So these are secondary identities because they're due to change over time. And so those, we can say, are somewhat unstable to base your whole life upon because they will change over time. And so anyway, we'll talk about this a little further, that actually you have a primary identity, and that primary identity is the thing that you should be basing your life on and living it with. That doesn't mean that your secondary identities of your job, of your relationships, you should just forget about them. It means just don't put them as the forefront, as the number one thing that governs how you operate within the world. And so I wanted to speak about this a little more, and starting with honoring Gita Jayanti, speaking a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita, and asking you all this question, and that is, who is the hero of the Bhagavad Gita? Yeah, look at that, right off straight away, Arjuna. Arjuna is a hero of the Bhagavad Gita. And so if we were to describe Arjuna's identity on one level, what would we say is his identity? Let me give some further context. We can also understand that the Gita is a section or a part of the Mahabharata. And so if you've read the Mahabharata, or if you know something about it, or if you watched a TV series, because when I was younger I used to watch it, the old one, I don't know what the new one's like, when I was young we used to watch this, it used to come on in England. There's something that's illustrated again and again and again about Arjuna's identity. So I'd like to ask you all, how would you identify him? Okay, microphones are coming. I had one there and I had two here. Warrior. Could you describe so let's play with that a little bit. Warrior. Give me some qualities of a warrior.
Warrior is somebody that protects their land, stands up for their people.
Stands up for other people. What about?
He's heroic. He's the best of the bowmen. He's wielder of the Gandiva bow.
Confident and fearless.
Fearless.
Never steps down from any battle.
Disciplined.
Courageous. Unafraid. Focused. Supreme archer. That's bonus points for that one. Supreme archer. Yeah, substantiated in the Mahabharata, because who is the antagonist or who's the anti-hero of the Gita? Say it a little louder. And he's envious of Arjuna. And one of the reasons he's envious is Arjuna's a better archer than him. He even says, who's their guru? And what does he say? You favor Arjuna more than anyone else. And there's a whole test that takes place that proves, right? You know the test I'm talking about? Anyone know what I'm thinking? Which test? Microphone.
Dronacharya asked Arjuna, like all his disciples, to point, aim at the bird's eye, and all the other disciples, like Duryodhana and all the Kauravas, they said that they are looking at the tree and something else. Someone said that they are looking at a bird, but Arjuna said that he is just seeing the eye of the bird.
Yeah, thank you. So this test was taken, and the reason that this test was implemented is because Duryodhana, he felt so envious, and he kept saying, oh, you favor Arjuna. So they thought, okay, we'll put this test together just to prove why. And so Dronacharya, he puts, some people say a model of a bird. Anyway, we're promoting veganism, so we'll say the same thing. He puts a model of a bird in a tree, and the aim of the test is that you have to shoot the arrow through the eye or at the eye of the bird, the model of the bird in the tree. So one by one, he calls his disciples, and he says, okay, take your bow, take your arrow, and now aim. And then before they shoot, he says, don't shoot yet. What do you see? And each one of them slowly says, well, I see the tree, I see the leaves, I see the sky, I see other birds. And then he goes through one by one, and he says, don't shoot. Okay, go away, sort of thing, that's enough. And he goes like this, and everyone keeps talking about other things that they're seeing. And Arjuna comes, and he says, aim, what do you see? I see the eye of the bird. Okay, what about anything else? I don't see anything else. I see the eye of the bird. What about the tree? No, just see the eye of the bird. The sky? No, just the eye of the bird. And he tells him to shoot, and he hits the eye. There's a whole interesting, there's another class about that story, because I've been thinking about that story a lot too. And the interesting thing to me is that none of the others even got the opportunity to shoot the arrow. These weren't just like amateur archers. These were the best archers that existed. Who's to say that they wouldn't have hit the eye? But that wasn't the aim of the game. It wasn't just to hit the eye, but it was about getting your focus straight. But anyway, that's a different class, another time. But this is just to illustrate that Arjuna, he was just the most famous, most accomplished warrior. And within being a warrior, the subset of that we can say is that he was the most accomplished archer. Like Navina Narada Prabhu, you just said this, and put your hands up if the others know it. And he just said it, so if you don't know it, that means you weren't listening. But what's the name of Arjuna's bow? Say it a bit louder, I can't hear you. So a lot of you know that. That's how much of a great archer he is. Not only do you know that he's a great archer, you know the name of his bow. That's how much of a great archer he is. That's his identity. And now we're going to go to the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, if we may. And we're going to just look at the 4th verse. And we can just have all the verses up. We don't need to get into them one by one. Oh, just chapter 1. No, you know how you can do it where you have all just the English translations? Because I sang for too long, I can't go through this in too much detail now. Okay, let's go down to text number 4, please. And can someone read this text?
Here in this army are many heroic bowmen equal in fighting to Bhima and Arjuna. Great fighters like Yuyudhana, Virata and Drupada.
Okay, so who is speaking this verse? You can just stay there for now. Who is speaking this verse? No? Yeah. He's speaking this about his own enemy, who he envies so much. And it's interesting, he's saying, on my side, there's also great fighters, and who does he compare them to? Bhima and Arjuna. And he can't just compare him to Arjuna because he doesn't like Arjuna, so he has to say Bhima and Arjuna. So this is the 4th verse of the whole book. And again, what's being substantiated here is, Arjuna is such a great warrior that I'm going to compare my army to him. Because when you compare something, you don't compare it to the worst, right? If you're trying to make the point of how good something is, you compare it to the best of something, right? Does that make sense? You don't compare it to the worst and say, this is so great, look, it's better than the worst thing ever. You say, this is so good, it's better than the best of anything. So here in the Bhagavad Gita, the 4th verse, the enemy of Arjuna, he himself is also substantiating he's such a great warrior. And we already established that a warrior means he's heroic, he's courageous, he doesn't have any fear, he's determined, he's stable, he's sane, he never backs down. This is the identity that's now being shaped for the hero of the book, Arjuna. Okay, so now from here we're going to go to same chapter. We're going to go to verses 21 through to 29, and if someone could please read these verses. Same chapter, 21 through 29. Whoever reads, I'll be very grateful eternally.
Arjuna said, O infallible one, please draw my chariot between the two armies, so that I may see those present here, who desire to fight, and with whom I must contend in this great trial of arms.
We're going to go through to 29. Yeah, whoever wants to go can go.
23. Let me see those who have come here to fight, wishing to please the evil-minded son of Dhritarashtra.
Sanjaya said, O descendant of Bharata, having thus been addressed by Arjuna, Lord Krishna drew up the fine chariot in the midst of the armies of both parties.
In the presence of Bhishma, Drona, and all the other chieftains of the world, the Lord said, just behold, Partha, all the Kurus assembled here.
There Arjuna could see, within the midst of the armies of both parties, his fathers, grandfathers, teachers, maternal uncles, brothers, sons, grandsons, friends, and also his father-in-law and well-wishers.
When the son of Kunti, Arjuna, saw all these different grades of friends and relatives, he became overwhelmed with compassion and spoke thus.
Arjuna said, My dear Krishna, seeing my friends and relatives present before me in such a fighting spirit, I feel the limbs of my body quivering and my mouth drying up.
My whole body is trembling, my hair is standing on the end, my bow Gandiva is slipping from my hand, and my skin is burning.
Thank you so much. So now if we go back to the definition that we gave of a warrior just a few moments ago, does this sound like something a warrior would be saying? Right? It's quite contradictory to that identity that we had said was formulated throughout the whole Mahabharata and in the 4th verse of the book in and of itself, the identity of the great heroic warrior who's fearless, who never falters. These words are not being spoken by someone who's living from that identity, right? Can we agree? I found something very interesting in this text 29, and I'll let you all guess. There's one thing in this that really, years and years ago when I read this, particularly stood out to me, and I was like, why is this in here? And I've thought about it for many years, and I think I came to a conclusion. So if anyone can guess, you've got 1 minute to guess. There's one thing. Wow, we got the A-star student say it in the microphone.
Gandiva is slipping?
It's slipping, yeah. That really stood out to me, that his bow is slipping. I'll tell you why this stood out to me. So many years ago, I used to go to school. I'm so glad it was many years ago. I don't know if they still do this anymore, but I used to have to write essays. Do you ever have to write essays? And they used to say to you, this essay has to be 2,000 words, or 5,000 words, or whatever how many thousand words it had to be. And so you would write this whole essay. I remember we had to write an essay on Macbeth. Anyone know what Macbeth is? It's a play written by William Shakespeare. So we had to write this essay. I can't remember how many words it had to be. But anyway, I wrote the whole essay, and then, in those days, computers weren't so sophisticated, so you had to do the word count afterwards. And I'm short of the words. So I had to go back and you'd add some fluff, right? Because you had to make the word count. So, instead of saying the opening line being Macbeth is a play by William Shakespeare, it then becomes Macbeth is a play by William Shakespeare, who was born in England on such and such a date and lived in such and such a place. He also wrote these many other plays. And then he died in this place. His favorite food was this. And then you start talking about the play because you have to add some fluff because you have to make the word count. You ever have that experience? You have to do it, right? Because how else are you going to pass? You have to add the fluff. And what does fluff mean? Fluff means you add stuff that really does nothing for the narrative. It doesn't really add any value to the point that you're trying to make. It's just fluff. And what do we do with fluff? We take it out of our dryer and we throw it in the trash most of the time. It really has no purpose. But the Shastra is very different. There's no word count here. It's not as if we have to hit a certain number of words in the script in order to get this to be published. This is just a conversation that's taking place on a battlefield here. And the description's being given. So there's no fluff. Every single word is put in there for a reason. Every detail that's given is given for a reason. And so when I saw this, I thought, why put the detail of his bow slipping from his hand? I think we got the point, right? He's stressed out, he's trembling. But this detail really stood out to me. Anyway, so keep that in your mind. This detail is important because there's no thing in the Shastra that's not important. It's put there for a reason. And so now we're going to go to the last verse of this chapter, which I believe is verse 46.
Sanjaya said, Arjuna, having thus spoken on the battlefield, cast aside his bow and arrows and sat down on the chariot, his mind overwhelmed with grief.
So here we have it again. He casts aside his bows and arrows and sits down on the chariot. And this is the concluding verse of the first chapter. Now let's look at it symbolically. What is the book called? And what does that mean? Song of God, right? And who would we say is God? Krishna. And this is the first chapter. He hasn't said a single thing yet. This is his book. And he hasn't even said a single word yet. And we've heard this idea of the bow. So imagine now the context. This is a book. This book is part of the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata substantiates again and again and again how Arjuna is the most fearsome warrior. And particularly, he's the best archer. And in the first chapter now, twice we've heard. Once we heard that his bow slipped from his hand, and now we hear that he puts his bow aside. If we're talking about the identity that was formed for him, that identity's kind of been lost now. Because what is an archer without his bow? He's just another guy standing on a battlefield, right? And imagine what circumstances to lose your bow. It's not as if he's having dinner with his friend and he puts his bow aside. At the time that he needs his bow and arrow most, it's slipping from his hand, and then in the end he casts it away. That's very symbolic. Because now if we go to the second chapter, right to the beginning, we will see someone want to read the first 2 verses?
Sanjaya said, seeing Arjuna full of compassion, his mind depressed, his eyes full of tears, Madhusudana, Krishna, spoke the following words.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the value of life. They lead not to higher planets, but to infamy."
So now Krishna starts to speak. He didn't speak before. Some commentators say that actually this is the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita now. That the first chapter was really just setting the scene, and this is where the Gita begins. But it could not begin with Arjuna as the heroic warrior archer. It couldn't begin like that, because Krishna wouldn't speak to him in that sense. Of course, we understand Krishna spoke to him in other ways, but now Krishna is going to start instructing him. And in order to instruct him, first and foremost, what Arjuna had to do is he had to become humble. He had to become humbled. And we see, I forget which verse, but if you go down further, Krishna says this, Arjuna says this. 2:7. And someone...
Now I'm confused about my duty and have lost all composure because of miserly weakness. In this condition, I'm asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I am your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me.
So this is where the identity takes a shift. This is right at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. This isn't like halfway through the book. This is right in the beginning. Krishna doesn't speak. Arjuna, he's set as this heroic warrior. Now that status of the warrior dissipates. The bow slips from his hand. He casts it aside. He sits down. And what does he do? He admits his shortcomings. He admits his fallacy here. Like, not fallacy, but the fault in his own being at that moment. Now I am confused about my duty. You ever feel confused? You can ask my wife this. I'm often confused, but I never admit it. I often say, no, I know exactly what I'm talking about. You just don't understand. I'm not confused. Because we all have an ego, and we don't want to admit when we're wrong. But here, he's admitting, in his most vulnerable state, at the battlefield, where he's the most heroic warrior, so we're thinking he's definitely going to win. He is admitting, I'm confused. I've lost my composure. I'm feeling weak. And this is what he does. Now he steps into that primary identity I was talking about previously. The secondary identity of being the archer is gone, is put on hold for now. And he steps into the primary identity. Now I'm your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So Krishna is speaking to all of us, actually. But are we in this mood of I don't know, man. I'm helpless here. I'm just surrendering to you. You please tell me what I should do. Because if we adopt that mood, that means we're moving now, which identity is in the driver's seat of our lives. If Arjuna is standing with his bow and arrow thinking, I'm a heroic warrior, Krishna, let's do this. Let's get on with it. Why are we in the middle of this battle? Why are we standing here? Come on, let's start shooting our arrows. Do you think Krishna would have then said, okay, let me tell you a few things before you do that? I know you're confident, but hold on a second, my friend. No, because you know this, if someone's arrogant, and by arrogant we can say overly confident, full of themselves, sure of themselves, how much are you going to say, no, that's not the right way to do that? Because even if you said that, what were they going to say? You don't know what you're talking about, leave me alone. Do you know who I am? I'm Arjuna. You know that test with the bird in the tree? I won that test. Krishna wouldn't be able to hear Krishna. It's the same thing with us. That as long as we're putting in the driver's seat of our lives an identity that is secondary to this identity, which is I'm a soul surrendered to you, Krishna, then we can't fully hear the message of Krishna. Those identities, I'm not saying that you have to throw them away. Because Arjuna also says that to Krishna, okay, Krishna, I'm going to leave the battlefield, I'm going to go live in the forest. And Krishna says, you're a fool. No, you have to fight. But fight for me. Switch the identities. You're a warrior still. But that's not what you are in the first instance. In the first instance, you're a soul that's surrendered to me. And in the second instance, you're a warrior. And if you think like that, you make this shift of identity. So this is what I took when I read that verse, when I read, the bow slipped from his hand. I was like, symbolically, what does that mean? An archer without his bow is no longer an archer. And it was, to me, it indicates this idea of like, yes, there's so many things in our lives that we have to do. There's so many identities that we carry at one time. I'm sitting here, I'm the speaker, I'm a devotee, I'm a this, I'm a that. But none of those mean a single thing if I don't understand that all of that only has meaning when first and foremost I'm a soul surrendered to Krishna. That's the only time it has meaning. Now, we can say this, but this is just one verse. This is just in the first, you're not even halfway through the second chapter. This book has how many chapters? 18. You make this whole thesis based on one verse where the bow slipping, a second verse where he puts the bow aside, and a third verse where he says, I'm a soul surrendered unto you. And I created this whole thesis based on those 3 verses. So then that's not a good argument because you have to substantiate again and again, right? Right? Do we? Otherwise people may not believe you. Some of you might, so then the class is over, we should just go home. But we'll carry on because we've got 40 minutes left. So I wanted to see, are there other instances of a similar thing happening somewhere in our Shastra or in the examples of our Acharyas where someone's identity, that secondary identity, that's more an identity of this realm, blocks them from connecting to Krishna? And I found one. I found a few actually, but I'm going to speak about one. So now we're going to go to the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and we're going to go to the Madhya Lila, and we're going to go to chapter 13. So far I'll just summarize what we talked about. We talked about that throughout the Mahabharata, the identity that's created for Arjuna is this fearsome warrior. We defined a warrior as someone who's fearless, doesn't hesitate, focused. We substantiated that by the 4th verse of the 1st chapter in which Duryodhana, who's the enemy of Arjuna, also says he's a great warrior because he compares his army to him. Then we said his bow slipped from his hand, he puts it aside, he admits his fallacy, not fallacy isn't the right word, but he admits his shortcoming. And he admits that, I don't know what to do in this situation. Even though, everyone thinks that I'm the best at this, I'm surrendering to you. And then Krishna began to speak to him. So this chapter in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's really important for us, particularly in our Gaudiya Vaishnava line, because this Rath Yatra pastime really symbolizes so much. And I won't get into it too much, but what I'll say is Mahaprabhu would observe the Rath Yatra, and it wasn't the Rath Yatra, we do Rath Yatra too. Rath Yatra all over the world now, and it's like an outreach thing. We do it so we can spread the holy name and so many things. And that's one level of it. But on another level, this Rath Yatra is there's a deep meaning to this. And when Mahaprabhu was observing this Rath Yatra, what is he thinking about? He's thinking about Krishna meeting the gopis. Where? Kurukshetra. And where was the Gita spoken? Kurukshetra. It really has a really prominent position within our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. Anyway, that's another class there. But this Rath Yatra pastime, there's a lot of deep meaning here. And so I'll just set the scene. Mahaprabhu brings all of his devotees together. It's like a really joyous celebration. He divides, I think, 4 parties he creates, kirtan parties, and there's 24 members combined. I can't remember how many Madanga players and kartal players, whatever. And Mahaprabhu, he's dancing in ecstasy. And all of the devotees are in deep ecstasy, observing this Rath Yatra celebration. And that's what this chapter outlines. And it's a very important chapter. I'd very highly recommend studying this chapter because there's so many nuggets of wisdom and gems within this. But we're particularly going to go to text 180. And then we're going to go from here through to text 188. And so now let's just set the scene. Mahaprabhu's dancing. So we're going to start at 180, then we're going to go down. So let's go back up. Okay, we'll read all of them down to 188. But I'll just, again, Mahaprabhu's been dancing. All the devotees are in great bliss and deep joy. This is like the best festival they've ever experienced. Mahaprabhu's in this deep ecstasy. Further up in the chapter, you read about Mahaprabhu's crying, he's perspiring, he's dancing. Like no one's seen him like this before. He's just so deeply in like Radha Bhav, seeing Lord Jagannath. And then we're going to read these few verses here. Naveen Narada Prabhu, would you like to go from 180 to 188, please?
Text 180. When Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was dancing and wandering in this way, he fell down in front of Maharaj Prataprudra. Maharaj Prataprudra picked the Lord up with great respect. But upon seeing the king, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to his external senses. After seeing the king, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu condemned himself, saying, "Oh, how pitiful it is that I have touched a person who is interested in mundane affairs." Not even Lord Nityananda Prabhu, Kashishwara, or Govinda took care of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he fell down. Nityananda was in great ecstasy, and Kashishwara and Govinda were elsewhere. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had already been satisfied by the king's behavior, for the king had accepted the service of a sweeper of Lord Jagannath. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually desired to see the king. However, just to warn his personal associates, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, externally expressed feelings of anger. King Prataprudra became frightened when Lord Chaitanya showed external anger. But Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya told the king, "Don't worry." Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya informed the king, "The Lord is very satisfied with you. By pointing you out, he was teaching his personal associates how to behave with mundane people." Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya continued, "I shall submit your petition when there is an opportune moment. It will then be easy for you to come and meet the Lord."
Thank you so much. So just some more context here. Maharaj Prataprudra, he was the king of Puri. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he lived in Puri. And, you know, most people, if the king wants to see you, you'd go see the king, right? You'd be like, "Oh, I really want to see the king." The king wanted to see Mahaprabhu, and Mahaprabhu said, "No, I'm not going to see him. I'm a sannyasi, I have no business meeting with people who are, as we read, involved in mundane affairs." Nowadays it's slightly different, you know. The sadhus all want to be like with Modi taking pictures, but in those days it was different. Maharaj Prataprudra, they didn't want any, no, he's a king, what business do I have? Now, of course, we're reading this in the CC, so we're getting the other added layers where like the Lord was already pleased with him, we see that. But just put yourself in Maharaj Pratapudra's position. He's such a sweet soul. He's the king of Puri, and Puri is the city of Jagannath. It's not like he's just like, you know, our illustrious leader in this world right now, or in this country. And his heart's desire, his heart's longing is just to have an audience with Mahaprabhu, just to see Mahaprabhu, and Mahaprabhu keeps refusing him. But Maharaj Prataprudra doesn't give up his service, though. He continues to like serve the devotees. You know, he's still, okay, however you treat me, I'm still you're still the Lord of my life, you know? Just imagine how painful it would be that someone that you love so much in front of you is falling down, and you go to rescue them and pick them up. And as soon as you pick them up, they say, "Get away from me. Oh my God, I can't believe you picked me up. This is so pitiful. Get away. I have no business being with someone like you." Can you imagine how heartbreaking that would be? How it would like crush you completely? That's what's happening here with Maharaj Prataprudra. He's the king, and Mahaprabhu is saying, "Get away from me." And all he did was try and pick Mahaprabhu up. He just has his deep desires to see Mahaprabhu. And this petition that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is talking about is this very same thing, that he's asking all the devotees, "I just want to see Mahaprabhu, that's all I want to do, I don't want anything else." So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is saying, "Don't worry, when the time's right, I will submit your petition." Let's go now to the next chapter, which is chapter 14. And we're going to go to text 4, and we're going to go from there through to text 12. Someone like to read this? So just remember the scene that's been set. They're at Rath Yatra, Mahaprabhu's in ecstasy. Mahaprabhu, like in his ecstasy, falls down. Maharaj Prataprudra, whose heart's longing is to be with Mahaprabhu and serve in some way, picks him up, and Mahaprabhu says, "Get away from me." Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says, "Don't worry, when the time is right, I'll submit your petition." And then these preceding verses, 4 through till 12.
Text 4. While Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was resting in the ecstatic love, Maharaj Prataprudra entered the garden.
So I'll just stop there 1 second. Sorry, I forgot a piece. After the dancing, Mahaprabhu becomes fatigued. And actually, it's still there in Puri, behind the Gundicha temple. There is a garden. I forget what it's called, Jagannath something garden. There's a garden behind there. And Mahaprabhu, during the Rath Yatra, to rest, he goes into this garden. And he's there alone in the garden to rest. And now we hear that what happens? Maharaj Prataprudra, he enters that garden. Next verse, please.
Following Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's instructions, the king had given up his royal dress. He now entered the garden in the dress of a Vaishnava.
Let's stop there for 1 second too. Anything interesting about that verse that jumps out, that connection to what I said in the beginning about Arjun?
Losing his identity.
He gave up his royal dress. Isn't that interesting? He wants to see Mahaprabhu. He's the same person. He's exactly the same person. Arjun was the same person. Arjun, just his bow fell out of his hand. Then Krishna begins to speak to him. Prataprudra Maharaj, he's the same person. But in order to approach the Lord, he had to give up the royal dress. He now entered the garden in the dress of Vaishnav. What's a Vaishnav? What identity does a Vaishnav have? I'm your servant. Right? I'm surrendered to you, Krishna. Symbol of humbleness. Do you see any connection to Arjun and Krishna speaking to Arjun and now Maharaj Prataprudra approaching Mahaprabhu? Do you see that? The bow slipped, the royal dress had to come off. He had to become humble and admit, I don't know what to do, Arjun. Maharaj Prataprudra, he has to enter in the dress of a Vaishnav, which means in the dress of a servant in a mood of humility. Sorry for interrupting you, but we can carry on from there.
Text 6. Maharaj Prataprudra was so humbled that with folded hands he first took permission from all devotees. Then with great courage, he fell down and touched the lotus feet of Lord.
I'll stop you there again, sorry. This is another important thing, right? Maharaj Prataprudra was so humble that with folded hands he first took permission from all the devotees. This is the process. It's not that you can just approach Krishna by yourself. And it's even said earlier, following Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's instructions, he took off the royal dress. That it was the mercy of the devotees that then helped him approach Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so when we have this attitude of service, yes, it's an attitude of service to Krishna, but that's an attitude of service to Krishna and everything else that's connected to Krishna. And that means Krishna's devotees too. I promise you I won't interrupt anymore.
Text 7. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lay on the raised platform with his eyes closed in ecstatic love and emotion, the king very expertly began to massage his legs. The king began to recite verses about the Rasa Leela from Srimad Bhagavatam. He recited a chapter beginning with the words Jaite Te Dikam. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard these verses, he was pleased beyond limit and he said again and again, go on reciting, go on reciting. As soon as the king recited the verse beginning with the words Tav Kathamritam, the Lord arose in ecstatic love and embraced him. Upon hearing the verse recited by the king, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, you have given me invaluable gems, but I have nothing to give you in return. Therefore, I am simply embracing you. After saying this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began to recite the same verse again and again. Both the king and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were trembling and tears were flowing from their eyes.
Isn't that kind of beautiful? If we go just up a little bit more, just to text 11, something stood out to me there. So this is Maharaj Prataprudra. He tried to catch Chaitanya Mahaprabhu out of like deep love for him so he wouldn't fall down and hurt himself. And Mahaprabhu says, get away from me. And now this same Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the same Maharaj Prataprudra, they're sitting together. And this is what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying. You have given me invaluable gems, but I have nothing to give you in return. Therefore, I'm simply embracing you. When he gave up the royal dress, when he took on not just the dress of the Vaishnav, but the mentality of a Vaishnav, which means that he went with humility. He begged permission from all the other devotees, another sign of that humility. And he went with a spirit of service. He didn't just go there and say, hey, Mahaprabhu, wake up. Prataprudra here, I'm here to see you. He went there in such a humble mood to serve. Mahaprabhu was laying there, you've been dancing, my Lord, I've been observing you. Let me massage your legs and let me sing to you while you rest. Give up the secondary identity, being the primary driver of your life. Adopt the real identity that you have in the primary position, which is a humble servant, a Vaishnav. Serve the other devotees and get their permission. Then you can serve the Lord. And Mahaprabhu will become so indebted to you that he will say, I have nothing to repay you. Krishna says the same thing to the gopis at Kurukshetra. When he meets them, I have no way of repaying you. I may be in Dwarka, but my heart is with all of you in Vrindavan. And here Mahaprabhu embraces Maharaj Prataparudra. But what did it take? He had to take off the royal dress. Are you getting a pattern here? We've got like 25 minutes left. I don't know how many more. So I'll just say we won't go to the verses because Ramananda Prabhu, I don't want you to go back and forth too much. But now if we go back, there's something called foreshadowing. Have you ever heard of foreshadowing? Foreshadowing is something that's done in literature. It's done now in movies and other things in which early on you kind of put something in a shadow. People don't really notice it. And then afterwards you go, oh, I remember why that happened. And so there's some foreshadowing that goes on. Can we go back to chapter 13? And we'll go to text 15. This is some foreshadowing that takes place here in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Kaviraj Goswami is just, his ecstasies come out and he creates this scene. Text number 15. While the Lord, this is Lord Jagannath, was being carried from the throne to the car, King Prataparudra personally engaged in the Lord's service by cleansing the road with a broom that had a golden handle. The king sprinkled the road with sandalwood-scented water. Although he was the owner of the royal throne, he engaged in menial service for the sake of Lord Jagannath. Although the king was the most exalted, respectable person, still he accepted menial service for the Lord. He therefore became a suitable candidate for receiving the Lord's mercy. Upon seeing the king engaged in such menial service, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became very happy. Simply by rendering this service, the king received the mercy of the Lord. See the foreshadowing? What did he have to do before he could get into the garden and embrace Mahaprabhu? He had to do service, cleaning, very menial. It's not what a king does, right? Like I'm from England, we don't have a king anymore, but we have a queen. I don't think she's there with her Dyson vacuum cleaner in Buckingham Palace, you know? What to speak of the streets outside, you know, in front of everyone. In front of everyone else, he's there sweeping. But that menial service for Lord Jagannath, as we see in text 17, he therefore became a suitable candidate for receiving the Lord's mercy. This is foreshadowing. This is telling us, oh, he became a suitable candidate, so his desire will be fulfilled. It's just not happening yet. And what else happened? How did the Lord's mercy first manifest? It manifested through Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Maharaj Prataparudra does the menial service. The devotees see that, and they become merciful to him. And then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya tells him, okay, go in. He's in the garden resting. Now take off your royal garments, dress like a sadhu, like a Vaishnav, and then go and see the Lord. His service attracted the mercy of the devotees. The mercy of the devotees then attracted the mercy of the Lord. But the identity had to be shed. You had to get a little humble first. First go down to go up. Right? So when we come to the temple, we may be all sorts of people. We may be CEOs or business owners, entrepreneurs, whatever we may be. But when we come to the temple, all of us bow down in front of the deities. At least we're supposed to. Unless you have a bad back, then you can do it in your heart. Why? Because that's the mood in which you enter. You enter with humility that you're you're above me. I'm very small. I'm your servant. I'm just going to bow down. That's what these two examples that I stated. One of Arjun's bow slipping, and this one here of Maharaj Prataparudra having to take off the royal garment. This is what it illustrates: is that give up those things that may give you prestige in the material sense. But you're talking to the Lord of the universe. It doesn't make a difference to him. The thing that he's looking for is how humble are you. We're so short on time, but I'm going to tell another quick story before I get into the real practical points, because I know you're a real practical audience. One thing that we could start to understand from this, though, or we could take away is that means I have to become a renunciate, right? Arjuna had to renounce being like this famous warrior, then he could interact with Krishna. Maharaj Prataparudra, he had to renounce being the king in order to... So then that means I have to become a renunciate, right? You could extrapolate like that, right? Yeah, I'm glad it's not just me who thinks that way. And there's some schools within the kind of Vedic paradigm that say that. They say you have to go through your life, do good things, do good deeds, and then you can amass enough piety that you'll be born in a Brahmin family. Not just a Brahmin family, though. You have to be born as a man in a Brahmin family. And not only that, then you have to become a sannyasi, and then you can achieve the highest realm that's available to you, right? Some schools say that. And we could maybe misunderstand from what I've just said about Arjuna, about Maharaj Prataparudra, that we have to become the same, renounce, just become humble, become like a beggar, sadhu, that's it, nothing, no. So there's another story. This is in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, so unfortunately we can't find it on the Veda base. And I'll tell it very quickly because we don't have too long left. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he had there were two aspects. Actually, we see this also in Puri. Just chant? Yes, Hare Krishna. We see this in Puri also. That on one side, he told Lord Nityananda, don't come back to Puri. Go to Navadvip and you preach and you spread this to everyone. And meanwhile, Mahaprabhu stayed there. Who did he stay with? And? But who were like the two intimate disciples? Not disciples, but devotees. Ramananda Roy and? Everyone's speaking at one time. Sarup Damodar. He stayed with them, and what did he do? He stayed in Gambhira, and he churned the nectar, and he got into his own ecstasy. So similarly, in the beginning of his pastimes, when he was in Navadvip, before he took sannyas, he did the same thing. He would go out during the day on the Harinams and spread the holy name, but at night, what would he do? He would go to Srivas Pandit Prabhu's home. Srivas Pandit Prabhu, can we come to your home one day also? He would go to the home of Srivas Pandit Prabhu, and it's said this in Chaitanya Bhagavat, it specifically says that Mahaprabhu himself would personally go and lock the door. And only his intimate associates were allowed in, and he would get into all sorts of ecstasies. They would sing and dance all night. But he would lock the door, and only select people were allowed. So now I'm just saying, earlier we said, well, they had to renounce, Arjuna had to renounce, Maharaj Prataparudra had to renounce. So on one occasion, a great renunciate came, and he said to Srivas Pandit, when's Bhakti Shastri? No. He came to Srivas Pandit Prabhu and he said, I want to see Lord Chaitanya dancing. Please let me come. Every day he would come to Srivas Pandit's house and say, please, please, please. He was so renounced. Some translations say he only drank milk, the brahmachari. Other translations say he only drank milk and fruit. Not that that's like, that's too much of a high, opulent feast that he's having. But let's just go, for the sake of making impact on the story, he only drank milk, that's it. He's so renounced, no worldly attachments, he only drinks milk. After a while, Srivas Pandit Prabhu thinks, okay, I have to have compassion to you. He's coming every day. Okay, you come, but Mahaprabhu is very strict about who's allowed in and who isn't. So you hide behind this curtain. So he hides behind the curtain, Mahaprabhu comes, locks the door. The devotees start to sing, Mahaprabhu is dancing, he's dancing, and all of a sudden Mahaprabhu stops. He says, I'm not feeling the ecstasy today. Something's not right. I'm just not feeling it. I'm not in the bhav. Somehow, everything feels the same, but something's not right. There's someone here who's not qualified to be here. Srivas Pandit Prabhu becomes very afraid. Right? Because he knows. He's like, no, Mahaprabhu, please, let's carry on. This is great. This is wonderful. Come on. Let's keep it going. No breaks in the holy name, right? No. We can't continue. Someone's here who's not qualified. And Srivas Pandit finally says, yes, Mahaprabhu, actually, there's one brahmachari. But he's so renounced. He only drinks milk. And he wanted to see you. And Mahaprabhu explained the Chaitanya Bhagavat, he becomes like a lion. That's the qualification? That's what it takes to see me? That you only have to drink milk? That's what it means? Remove him from here immediately. You think it's that easy to see me, to have my audience in this mood, this ecstatic mood, is you just only drink milk, that's it. And then Mahaprabhu goes on to say, it doesn't matter. You could be a sannyasi, you could be the most renounced, you could be anything, but if you don't have attachment to Krishna and Krishna's service, then you are not qualified to come here. He goes on to explain that you could be the lowest of the low. You could be born in like a completely outcast family. In the Chaitanya Bhagavat, they say dog eater, but anyway. You could be in like that realm, category of person. But if you become attached to my service, then you are the most qualified person. he goes on to say, what qualification do the gopis of Vrindavan have? Did they only drink milk? Were they renounced? No, their qualifications was they just loved me. And they were so deeply attached to me. That's their qualification. That's the qualification you have to have. Anyway, imagine the brahmachari is like, I only drink milk. Mahaprabhu became so angry. Anyway, it's then explained in Chaitanya Bhagavat, Mahaprabhu calls him back and he embraces him. And again, he's setting the example here, just like he did with Maharaj Prataparudra. Not through your renunciation either can you attain me. Maharaj Prataparudra, not by being a king, not by your material prowess or your material position can you approach me. Not by being a renunciate, only drinking milk, I'm so renounced, can you approach me. The only way that you can approach me, he says this in the Gita, anyone know the verse? How am I to be known? Through loving devotional service. This is the only way you can know me. You could be the warrior on the battlefield, you could be the king of Puri, you could be a renounced brahmachari. Unless you have that attachment to serving Krishna with all of your heart, you can't approach Krishna. This is the primary identity. So now we're going to go to the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I think it's the same chapter actually. Madhya Lila, chapter 13, verse number 80. And Ananda Kishore Prabhu is going to get the microphone because he already started this verse. He gave away the ending of my class in the beginning. That's called foreshadowing. We learned that. So let's go to the Sanskrit of this verse. I think it is Sanskrit because this is a quotation. Oh. You can just click 80 and then it'll take you to the verse, right, with the purport. So while we go to it, this is what's happening. Mahaprabhu is... We see with Arjun had to give up the primary identity of being the warrior. Maharaj Prataparudra had to give up the royal dress, that primary. The renunciate had to give up the attachment to being a renunciate. And in Chaitanya Bhagavat, Mahaprabhu says the only qualifications that you have to be attached to me and attached to my service. And that, by extrapolation, means attached to serving his devotees too. And that same pastime at Rath Yatra, Mahaprabhu was in front of Lord Jagannath reciting verses. And this is a very famous verse that he recites. And Ananda Kishore Prabhu is going to recite it for us now.
Naham vipro nacha narapati nahi vaishyo na shudro naham varni nacha grihapati na vanasto yatirva kintu prodyan nikhil paramananda purnamratabder gopi baratur padakamalayor dasa dasa anudasa.
And the translation, please, Prabhu.
I am not a Brahmana, I am not a Kshatriya, I am not a Vaishya or a Shudra, nor am I a brahmachari, a householder, a vanaprastha, or a sannyasi. I identify myself only as the servant of the servant of the servant of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna, the maintainer of the gopis. He is like an ocean of nectar, and he is the cause of universal transcendental bliss. He is always existing with brilliance.
I identify myself only as the servant of the servant of the servant of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna. Now let's think about who's saying this. Who's saying this verse? No, who's? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying this verse. He's saying it in front of Lord Jagannath. Who is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? He's a Brahmana. Is he not? He's born in, right? What else is he? He's a sannyasi. What's he saying? I'm not a Brahmana, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not that. I identify myself only as a servant of the servant of the servant of the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna. This is the primary identity. This is the identity that we have to adopt in order to approach Krishna. Or rather, to allow Krishna to approach us. We adopt this mood, and his mercy is freely flowing. This is the station you have to tune into in order to pick it up. I'm not saying now that you give up everything in your life, give up your job, give up your family. That's not what's being said here, because that's not what's said to Arjun either. It's not that Arjun stopped being the warrior. No, he surrenders to Krishna, and that surrender then informs him to actually fight the battle. Maharaj Prataparudra doesn't give up the royal dress and never put it back on. He goes back and continues to be the king. But what has to change? The mindset has to change. The mindset has to shift. And what's that shift? The shift is that I'm not the center of the universe. My desires are not the main thing that I have to be like striving for. Those are secondary. Who is the center of the universe? It's Krishna. And who am I? I'm his servant. It's just a simple shift of the mindset. And Krishna then goes on to explain this. In other parts of the Bhagavad Gita, he says, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, do that as an offering unto me. Right? So it's simple in one sense. You shift your mindset. So we're going to go to Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 65. We discussed 66 yesterday, yeah? Right? At your house. 65. This is what, so what's the formula? Because let's get into practical stuff now. So anyway, we substantiate this thing. You have to make this your primary identity. Okay, but that's all very well said here in the temple. What am I going to do tomorrow? I have to go back to work. What's going to happen? So this is what Krishna says. Always think of me. How many people think? You're thinking about answering that question, aren't you? Everyone. A lot of people don't think, unfortunately, but most people, we have to think. There's a tendency to think. Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. This is the shift of mindset. Always think of Krishna. I mean, it's a tall order, I know, because we think of so many other things, but are there practical ways in our life that we can do this day to day? So we were together, some of us yesterday, and we were talking about practical ways to insert Krishna in your life. So I'm going to test some of you who were there. What ways did we think of? Practical ways that you can insert Krishna in your life. I'm looking at you four in particular because you were there.
While we go to start driving, before we, after putting the seat belt, before we
That's right.
Before we start, we chant one mantra: Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Yeah, right? Find ways to always think of Krishna. So there's so many things that we do every day. Most of you probably drive a car every day, yes? When you get in your car, put the seatbelt on first. But before you start the car, just chant one mantra and see if that helps you remember Krishna in that one moment. Then find other places in your life. What were some of the other methods that we came up with? I'll give you a clue. I'm about to do it right now. Remember?
When we drink water, we should remember the verse, Rasoham apsu konteya. And Krishna says that in this verse that I am the taste in water.
How many of you drink water? Some of you, right? It's very important for you to drink water because I think the body's like 80% water or something. 70%. I don't even know, but maybe mine's 80% because I drink a lot. So when you drink water, could you do that? Say it again very loudly. What do you have to say before you take a sip of water?
Krishna is the taste in water.
Say it in Sanskrit also, just in case people want. You have an option.
Rasoham apsu konteya.
Is that, how long did that take? Let's count, let's time it. Go. Say it and I'll count.
Rasoham apsu konteya.
2 seconds. Can you spend 2 seconds before you take a sip of water to say that? Will it help you remember Krishna? Will it help you think of Krishna? Does Krishna say that we should think of him? Could you do it? Not everyone said yes this time. It's a simple thing you could do. We gave some other examples that probably are not suitable for this audience. But there's so many ways you can look at your life and see, how can I insert Krishna somewhere in this? And it doesn't mean, we may not be ready to like flick the switch today that we see Krishna everywhere. But if I get in my car and I chant one mantra, maybe I think of Krishna one more time in the day than I would have before. Maybe when I drink water and I say this mantra, I think of Krishna one more time than I did before. And slowly, by like this, you keep inserting Krishna into different parts of your life. And then this verse, always think of me. And so if you always think of Krishna, and you understand Krishna to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then by relation to that, then you understand yourself to be his servant. So now it's not such a big deal of having to figure out your primary identity. It becomes quite simple. Just insert Krishna in different parts of your life. Yes, Prabhu. Yeah, let's move on to questions actually, because now it's getting late. You need the microphone. I'm losing my hearing as I'm getting older.
So Prabhu, we can chant, but how do we get the deep sincerity and the faith? How do we deepen our faith?
How do we deepen our faith? Yeah. So Srila Rupa Goswami, he says Shraddha Devi is holding up the whole ISV, but he also says Shraddha moves our entire spiritual life. Shraddha means faith. But then he doesn't say that's it, just get Shraddha. He says he gives you other steps, right? Shraddha leads to Sangha. How do you get more Shraddha? Get more Sangha. Get Sangha with who? People who have Shraddha. Or just with Shraddha Devi Dasi. But like that, that's how you increase your Shraddha. Few steps. One is get the Sangha of people who have faith and determination and associate with them and serve them. Just as Maharaj Prataprudra, he served and he got the mercy of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Find people who have faith and that you have faith in and associate with them and serve them, and then your faith will start to grow. And then secondly, sadhana. Practice makes imperfect? Perfect. Practice, practice, practice. What are the symptoms of someone who has faith? Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives us 6 things. Steadiness is nishta, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur also says you accept which is favorable, you reject which is not favorable, you understand Krishna is my maintainer, Krishna is my protector. So just like that. Practice, have a sadhana where you can start to, in your life, see how Krishna is maintaining you, how Krishna is protecting you. Actually, I think last time I was speaking, you asked this question, Prabhu. It's been in my mind for like 2 months, and I wanted to speak to you about it. Now I have the opportunity. That we were talking about Damodar Leela, a very similar question. And you said, but what if I don't have faith that Krishna will protect me? And I gave some answer, I can't remember. But afterwards I thought, but who do you think is protecting you now? Right? Who do you think is protecting you now? So it's not about like, okay, now Krishna, please maintain me. It's like Krishna's already maintaining me, but can I see that in him? So how do you get that determination and that faith? Associate with people who have it and serve them, and have a sadhana, chant, read, particularly study the Shastra. That will give you a spiritual knowledge which will fortify your consciousness, and your determination will come. Thank you for the question. Hey, we got like 2 or 3 minutes left, I think. Anyone? Let's get into questions. But anyway, did that make sense, this class? It's a shift of a mindset, because when you shift your mindset, then the identity starts to shift. And that's what Arjuna had to do, that's what Maharaj Prataprudra had to do, that's what this milk-drinking brahmachari had to do. And in many instances throughout the Bhagavatam, we didn't have time to cover them all. You'll find this, where like the identity has to shift away from the identity of this world into the identity of the spiritual world, the primary identity, the eternal identity, the identity that does not change over time, which is that you are Krishna's eternal servant, you're a spiritual being. So if there's any questions, I think we have 3 minutes to go. Yes, Prabhu. And then Mataji. Hey, look, I'm about to drink water. It's an opportunity.
Prabhu, earlier in one of the texts that we were reading, what was the significance of the broom having a golden handle? Was it because it was the king who was sweeping, or because it was the service of the Lord?
Because it was the service of Lord Jagannath. And so we give Jagannath the best. So even a broom, which is something used for something very menial, you should make it the best broom that you possibly can make it, because you're using it to serve Krishna. Please.
How you explained it, it's from the information that you gave and the proofs that you gave, it feels so normal that that's what we should do. And in ideal situation, that's what I aspire for. But when practically it happens, when I am put into a situation that Arjuna was in, there are only 2 things happens, that I think, why me? And then I start blaming God that I served you this much, but you didn't protect me, because you brought me to this situation. And that anger, and you really act very very cheaply, not like a devotee, you know, because and then even then after you go and put up with and you say that, oh, I'm sorry because I was in this situation. I don't behave like a devotee when I'm squeezed like Arjuna.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
how?
He also didn't behave like a devotee, right? Because Krishna told him, right, just fight. And he, no, I'm not going to fight. Why should I fight? No, I'm not going to do it. So then Krishna had to speak the whole Gita to him. And in the end, Krishna says, anyway, deliberate on this and then do what you want to do. We spoke about that yesterday too. Do what you want. Krishna gives you that freedom. One thing I'll say, again, it's a shift of mindset. Because we can have the victim mentality. Why is this happening to me? Krishna, why are you doing this to me? I'm such a nice devotee. I try my best. I come to the temple. I'm scheduling all the classes here. You know how much service that is? I have to put the email out. People complain, why didn't I get the class? Why is this person giving the class? Why are you doing this to me? You just shift it. Why are you doing this for me? There's something in it. Krishna's doing it for some reason, that there's something within that situation or that circumstance that you're supposed to learn. And then if we move away from the victim mentality to more like, this somehow Krishna's giving me a gift. And I don't know that it's a gift yet, but let me try and figure out what is in this. Why are you doing this for me? Then we can move away, and that becomes very empowering, actually. And
there is no question of why, right? Because I surrender. When we surrender to Lord, then there is no question of why, right? It doesn't come from why.
yeah, but we also...
I am wholeheartedly surrendering to Lord. So where is the question?
Yeah, the problem is the wholehearted surrendering. It's kind of tough for us, actually. For most of us. I mean, I can speak for myself. It's very tough. I've been at this for quite a long time. And I'm still like, okay, Sunday I have to go to the temple. You know? So the wholehearted surrender part is the thing. But what will help you surrender more is to try and see the Lord's hand in everything that's happening in your life. And then you come to that stage. Mahaprabhu also says that in the last verse of Shikshastakam. Do what you want. Handle me roughly, make me broken-hearted, no problem, I'm yours.
Actually, I was looking at the question why in a very different way, in the sense that, Krishna, why are you doing it to me? What is it that you want me to learn from this experience that I'm going through right now?
Yeah, then you become grateful for the experience. I'll tell you just are we over time? Who's in charge here? I don't know. I think we're over time. But I'll just tell you a very quick story. 2 years ago, like just a few days ago, it was like 2-year anniversary, I had a car accident and I broke my neck, I broke my back. I mean, everyone said you'll never walk again, but now look at me. And at the time, it was like I was in so much pain, I couldn't figure it out. But now that I look back at it now, I think, Krishna, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the absolute best thing that ever happened to me. Because it gave me this like reset, right? Like I'd been a brahmachari for a number of years, like just full-time in service, and then I got married and I had to make money, and like so many distractions come in your life when you're trying to worry about how do you maintain yourself. And then Krishna takes a back seat, and he gave me a slap. And I didn't see it at the time, but I see it now. Like he just shook me, said, wake up. Your time is so short. Anything can happen to you at any minute. Where are you putting your attention? Which identity are you putting as the primary thing that you're focused on in life? At the time, I couldn't see it, you know. At the time, I was like, oh, Krishna, why me? I can't move. I'm in this big brace. I'm stuck, you know. But now I can think, wow, Krishna was so merciful, actually. He was so kind. He like really shook me and gave me that reawakening. Which identity are you going to live with as your primary identity? Which identity are you going to put literally in the driver's seat of your life? So like that. We have to think in those terms. And that's the point of what I'm trying to say here in this class, is that it's not about giving up all the other things in your life, but it's about identifying yourself first and foremost, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says in the verse that Anantadev Prabhu read, that the only thing I identify myself with is as the servant of 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 Krishna. And if we can do that, then your whole life will change. Thank you all so much. It was a great joy to be here. Forgive me for going over time. If you have any other questions, I'm around, so you can find me. Hare Krishna.